Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Seeds is a portrait of centennial farmers in the geographical South using lyrical black and white imagery. This meditative film examines the decline of generational black farmers and the significance of owning their own land. The film is called Seeds. It's been shortlisted for Academy Award consideration for Best Documentary Feature. Beautiful, moving film, very powerful film. We're joined today by the director, producer, cinematographer, sound recordist, Brittany Shyne. Brittany, welcome to Cinemophile.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Congratulations on this really beautiful film and also in so many different ways, a very intimate look into the lives of the people we see in it. I know this is something you've been working on for a while. I know this has been gestating for a while. You've been working on it for a while. What was it that got you started on pursuing this particular idea?
Of course. I started this project back in 2015.
Yeah.
I was actually in grad school during this time. During that particular moment in my life, there wasn't many films depicting Black farmers or Black Hungarian life. And historically, we've been marginalized in the agricultural landscape. And yet, Black Americans have been integral to the structural fabric of American society. And therefore, I really wanted to kind of rectify their lack of visibility by making a film that paid homage and celebrated a community that has been under-acknowledged. My great grandfather, he owned land in Homer, Louisiana. And then on my mother's side, they were sharecroppers, which is, a very complicated, type of conversation. And so, my dad, he grew up on the land till he was 4 years old and he really enjoyed it. And I wasn't really privy to that ancestral knowledge. And so I think that is how I kind of wanted to start this film, is really just being curious about, what does it mean to kind of maintain a legacy for so many generations?
Just by way of historical reference, kind of put it into a context. And correct me if I misstate anything here, but in terms of the transition of African Americans from slavery, away from slavery, into integration into, well, that's a loaded word in terms of how far along the community has come, but sharecropping became the next phase after the abolition of slavery. But I've heard that sharecropping was basically kind of another version of indentured servitude or slavery for many African Americans. But it was an incremental step. Is it fair to put it that way in terms of getting away from the legacy of slavery?
Of course. I mean, sharecropping was another form of, as you said, servitude, and 40 acres and a mule never really came into fruition,
Right.
And so I think that is why, like with this film, I was really particularly compelled to kind of do a story on centennial farmers, Black farmers who've owned land for over 100 years. So kind of getting away from sharecropping, but actually people who've owned the land, who possess the land in their name.
How did you get to know the people that we see in the film? What's the connection to them?
Yeah, so, during this time, I was doing a lot of research. And the first family, the oldest family in the film, the Kintavia Williams family, was actually my mother who found an article about them online, and she put us in connection. And I met the matriarch of the farm, Belle Williams, and she invited me down to Thomasville, Georgia, and that's how things began. And it wasn't until later on in the film I met Willie Head Jr., who I found out lives like 20 miles south from Payville, Georgia. And I found him online. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of how like the my connections with these participants got started.
They're such rich characters, and their lives are much about family and community and their love of their grandkids and all the things that you see in the film. Such an endearing portrait of the people we see in the film. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful film. I really want to underscore this to people who are interested in seeing seeds. It's shot in black and white, which I thought was a wonderful choice. It looks great. I love the definition in black and white. You get that contrast. It's a beautiful look to the film. But getting to know the people and also understanding their struggles just to survive. We're at a perilous place for the African American farming community in this country. Farming in general, small farms are under siege, if you will, but in particular, the African American farming community. So we see it all play out in very humanizing and very intimate terms.
I think with this film, as you said, what struck me was about the love and care with these families they had. I mean, with Willie Head in particular, it was so palpable. When I started this project, I knew that I didn't want to do something that was just issue based. I really didn't want to do something that was didactic or formulaic. I really wanted to kind of understand who these people were and really enmesh myself in their everyday lives and in their community and in their homes, right? You know, the political discourse is definitely kind of simmering beneath the surface throughout the film, but it's not really until the third act where it becomes a little bit more paramount and more we really understand kind of how these issues have been occurring for many, many decades and kind of the struggles and the fights of how there's just been a litany of discriminatory practices with these farmers and how like many of these farmers have, you know, lost land or not able to buy like equipment like seed or livestock. And we really understand how Willie Head is kind of an activist, you know, who goes to DC and, you know, this isn't the first time he's been, and these farmers have been going back and forth for decades trying to get federal subsidies for these farmers because a lot of these farmers, you know, have been applying for loans and they've been rejected. And, you know, white farmers have been getting these loans a lot more easily. So there's a lot of little nuances throughout the film that we see. But yeah, it's a film that I really wanted to make sure that we get the full picture of who these people are, just besides their kind of hardships, but also like why they're so active and wanting to own their land. And it's because they want it for their grandchildren. And the question to me is like, what happens if a community like this perishes? Like, what type of intergenerational kind of knowledge will be forsaken or lost if, you know, these farmers didn't have their land to pass down to the next generation?
Much of the film takes place on the farms, and then there is this one small section of the film where they go to lobby for the money that they're more than entitled to. The idea that this has been decades and decades of neglect and essentially keeping them from what they should have been getting all along in terms of the money that we're it's talked about in the film. You're right about Willie. Well, there's so many compelling people in the film, but one of the things that struck me is just how they're keeping things afloat in the film. We see day-to-day things, things that happen to do with the house, the farm equipment, anything and everything. They have to be able to do basically most of it, if not all of it, for themselves, and they do. I mean, they're able to kind of adapt to it, but it's also because they have this community of people around them to help. I saw a documentary film, it's been 4 or 5 years ago at least, called After Sherman. It's another film about the loss of land, just sort of basically, they were just told you don't own it anymore. This is it. You have to move on. These kinds of historic grand larceny robberies of people that they're for their just due this is another, to me, another example. But you know, it jumped to my mind when I was watching this film to see just exactly how systemic this is. And so, well, let's talk about the decision on your part as a filmmaker to film this in black and white. What was your thought in presenting it in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it was interesting. The first time I went down to Thomasville, Georgia, I thought there was something very special and remarkable about this place. It felt like a lived-in space, like history was a vessel to be protected.
Yeah.
There was just something archaic too, where you see old farming equipment, red dirt roads, and pecan trees and cotton fields. And at the time, I didn't think it was going to be black and white, but after I came back from my first shooting trip and I put the footage in the editing room, I thought, well, maybe this will look better in black and white. And it did. But I think I've always been really inspired by portraiture photography. There's so many photographers that have shaped this film, a lot of prolific visionaries, like Roy DeCarva, Gordon Parks, Jane Masumi Ash, Mexican photographer Priscilla Turbide, and filmmakers like Charles Burnett. But all these kind of artists helped me create some of the vision that I had for Seeds. But I knew that with this film that there was very something precarious and tenuous about this space, that it was at the precipice of many changes. Many of the elders in my film are in their 70s or 80s. And so I knew that I really wanted to I knew that time would be a theme in my film, the fragility of time, the permanence of time. And so all those things kind of influence the kind of the artistic language within the film. And so particularly like with Carly and Carrie and Walter, we're in cars a lot. And so I knew that that would be a motif in my film. So I just really wanted to slow down this farming space that it was very unhurried. It was very languid. And so I think all that was part of the kind of creative aspect within this film.
One of the things that I felt like you focused on, and it really illuminates a lot about the characters in the film, the people in the film, is you focused on hands, hands at work, hands at in loving ways in which they are part of that. And I thought their hands tell a story in and of itself.
That was intentional, I mean, I think we don't really see, I feel like I don't see a lot of elders in films. And so I was really captivated by their faces with wisdom, but also about the hands. We think of farming, how laborious and arduous it can be, but at the same time, they're also taking care of their child or their grandchildren. We see that with
Right.
Willie. We see that Carly, who's 89, who's like massaging or exercising his daughter's feet. All these kind of tactile details was really important for me to capture that kind of love and care and that duality of work and love that's infused throughout the film.
I know that you worked a lot with your editor in the film. You
Mhm.
worked for a while. This has been, as you mentioned, 9 years in the making.
Yeah.
Just curious about that in terms of filmmaking. What sort of the back and forth between what you were doing and then you going, taking it back. And I imagine it was a work in progress as you were filming this in terms of when you were looking at editing. So
Yeah, I
let's talk
mean,
a little bit
the
about that,
thing
Clint.
is that, oh, sorry. So I was filming, throughout those 9 years, but I think Malika came on, I think around 22, October 22. And so we had a lot of footage, but I was just really making work samples. So I was using those work samples to apply to grants and other fellowships and applications, but I didn't have like a rough cut or anything like that, or even assembly. And so she came on, of course, as the editor on the project. And, my film isn't very plot driven. And so it's what's going to be the bigger tapestry within this film. And so kind of finding those themes or themes that repeat or motifs, like I said, how cars are a commonplace in this film. And I think, we started editing with Willie's stuff actually just because his storyline is probably the most linear. We can follow his grandchildren. We have the activism, him going to DC. So that was a little bit easier. But then we have these other moments with elders, and their time in the film is a lot more quiet. So
Yeah.
like juxtaposing all these different elements was was a fun thing to do. I think even when we edited like the first scene, or what ends up to be, it's not the first scene we edited, but what ends up being the first scene, which is the scene in the beginning where we have Ebery and Claire in the car. And so when we edited that, we knew that was going to be an important scene to kind of start with because it does multiple things that really, we have this young, inquisitive girl really asking about death and life and what happens when people pass away, but also we see that this girl understands her family lineage is like this generational history that surrounds her, right? And so it was kind of a beautiful moment, but it was an informative moment to the audience is that we're going to understand like the space go in and out of with these elders in different capacities, and especially within this film. And so I think that was a good introduction of the fact that this film was going to be non-cyclical and about the cycles of lives and all that.
It's all there. It's beautiful. Beautiful to look at, beautiful to contemplate, just beautiful to sit with these people, spend time with these people. I have to ask because for any filmmaker to be shortlisted for Best Documentary Feature for this year's Oscars, congratulations on that. And this is your first documentary film, as I understand, first feature doc. So, congratulations. What are you working on future projects? Are you using this to sort of catapult yourself into the next project? How are you dealing with sort of the notoriety right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now I'm still processing everything. The film premiered last year at Sundance, and I've been traveling the festival circuit pretty much nonstop. And then you kind of do this other thing with the film when it's, getting all these beautiful acknowledgments and accolades. And I feel like I'm still trying to kind of embrace everything even though a lot of things are happening, it also goes by really fast, right? And I've been working on this project for so long, so I'm
Yeah.
just kind of trying to enjoy it before it goes away. And I do have other ideas, but I've been just kind of trying to enjoy this
Well,
space.
enjoy it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very solid strategy. I do want to let people know it did when you mentioned Sundance, it won the Grand Jury Prize at last year's Sundance Film Festival. It also won an award, Cinema Eye Award, for cinematography and debut feature film. And I assume then we'll be screening it here in Los Angeles coming up soon.
Yes, I think it's the 23rd, the
Gosh, I would be remiss if I didn't at least pass along that I hope that many of the people that we see in the film who are still with us are doing well and have had an opportunity to sort of enjoy this attention that they're getting now. Hopefully, it's helping with the issues that we see in the film in terms of getting money that they desperately need. I hope all of those things are kind of that a benefit of all of this may come their way from that. I love getting to know them. It was a great experience to just sit with them, as I said. Congratulations
Thank
on your
you.
work
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah, as director, producer, cinematographer, sound recordist, Brittany Shyne. The film is called Seeds, as I said, shortlisted for Academy Award consideration for Best Feature Documentary Film. All the very best. I look forward to more. Hope you'll come back at some point and join us again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.